This is Eric Rutan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
Thanks a lot for tuning into the show, because I've got Bill Steer from Carcass, and he was formerly in Napalm Death. A conversation with him to share with you. Now, the catalyst for the chat with Bill is due to the release of the new album from Carcass titled Torn Arteries. It'll be out on September 17, 2021 via Nuclear Blast Records. It's an absolute cracker, I must say. Definitely one of the albums of the year thus far. Now, if you tuned into my chat with Carcass bassist and frontman Jeff Walker, that was an interesting conversation to say the least, but I did go there and I hit Jeff up and I asked him for his thoughts on the, what would you call it? My proposition, if you like, that Carcass is one of the groups that influenced, if not the sole influence, potentially, anyway, one of the most significant influences, there you go, over the Gothenburg sound. You know, those great bands that came from Sweden, such as Dark Tranquillity, In Flames, and the big one is At the Gates. Look, you know, we're fans. That's what I am. At the end of the day, I might be a journalist, but I am a fan first and foremost. So I develop these ideas, and I just love the fact that I can have an opportunity to, or I get an opportunity to chat to an artist about these sort of topics. So yeah, I asked Jeff, and those of you that tuned into that chat know what he said. Well, if you stick around, you'll find out what Bill has to say as well. So maybe it'll make Blabbermouth and all those other news aggregation sites. We shall see. Something else, Bill and I spoke for about, I reckon it was about 25 odd minutes or so before we actually get into the meat and potatoes of the conversation. And I decided not to include that because we were just two blokes talking. So my first question, just so as you're aware, is when Bill was looking back on the deals that he signed when he was in Napalm Death and Carcass, you know, you got to be a trusting person around these sorts of things. So as a question sort of lined up around that, what was his take on being such a trusting young musician and signing deals with Earache, that sort of thing? So I'll cut straight to it. Here he is, Bill Steer from Carcass.
Really, you know, the dark ages in terms of our development as a band and as people, because obviously we were just kids, teenagers, and you're just delighted at the prospect of putting out a piece of vinyl, and you're very grateful to the person or people that are responsible for doing that. And as the cliche goes, you know, when you're 18 or whatever, you'll probably sign anything. So yeah, I wouldn't say we really have any grudges from that time, because it's just how things were. And you certainly can't deny what Digby achieved with Earache, because going back to that time, he was pretty much the only person we knew who took that type of music seriously and was prepared to put a little bit of money behind it and push it forward. I mean, hindsight's, you know, fantastic. Mm-hmm. But at that point, I don't recall anybody else of substance doing what Dig was doing. I mean, sure, plenty of people caught up before long or did similar things, but he seemed like the pioneering guy around then.
It just seems like he changed at some point, because I've spoken to Mortis and I've spoken to a few other artists, and they've just been fucked over, to be honest with you. There's no other way to say it. And I think if you met him in the 80s, it was a different person to what you got in the late 90s. And, you know, now they're like a rock label, aren't they? They've just gone right out of metal altogether. But, yeah, I mean, I know he's in business and he's got to sort of keep the lights on, but I mean, he's taken. Or actually, I'll ask you this: actually, with your earlier stuff, Reek of Putrefaction and Symphonies, do they own that still, or have you got ownership of that?
Yeah, no, they own it, to my knowledge. Jeff would always be the best person to answer this type of question, because he is the manager of Carcass, and he's just very business minded. He's great with facts, figures, statistics, and lots of stuff to do with the past. I mean, that kind of thing, it's so little a part of my, you know, daily worldview. You know, I remember doing those records, and I'm glad that they still have value for some people. And it's fun playing this stuff live when we are out there doing our thing. But what took place in the late 80s, early 90s, I'd just rather not dwell on it too much.
Is it weird for you? I've got to go there and ask this. You've appeared on 4 or 5 of the most continuously influential albums ever recorded in extreme metal. So Scum, From Enslavement to Obliteration, and then Putrefaction and Symphonies of Sickness. I get hundreds of new releases sent to me each month, so literally tens each week. And I said this to Jeff, and this is more pertinent for you because you appeared on all these 4 albums. I reckon about 20% of the stuff I get sounds like those 4 albums.
Wow.
Do you ever sort of stop to sort of take stock of that particularly in South America, man? I mean, there's massive, excuse me for using the third person here, but Bill Steer worship in South America. Are you aware of that?
No, not really. I mean, obviously we have played there and it's been fantastic. We've played to packed clubs and met lots of cool people. Yeah, I mean, I feel like with that kind of thing, if someone's saying we've been influential, that's great, but I wouldn't take it too personally, in the same way that I wouldn't take it too personally if someone slags you off.
Yeah.
You've got to have a kind of realistic balance to this. There are definitely groups out there, and that I can hear have been influenced by Carcass in some way, whether it's the early stuff or the later stuff where we were a little bit, more melodic and there's a bit more finesse or whatever. But that's the extent of it, because for every person who thinks of the band as significant, there's another 9 people who scarcely know about the band and certainly aren't familiar with the music.
Would you describe...
just within the metal scene, because I mean the metal scene obviously is incredibly splintered now, so it's quite possible for somebody to like extreme metal but not like the type of stuff that we've done, or any of our peer group either, for that matter.
Yeah, and that confuses the hell out of me, to be honest with you, because as a 43-year-old who remembered the impact that you had, even when you toured Australia back in '93, off the back of Heartwork, it was the first time I'd ever seen an extreme band feature in the newspaper, like mainstream press, like News of the World, our version of News of the World or whatever, but you guys are in there. And I remember the first time I heard Heartwork, I don't know, there was something about it. I had Power Slave, I think, and then I heard Heartwork, and I said, you've basically taken it that forward, that same sound forward. And I wasn't aware of any of the grinding stuff that you'd done beforehand because, you're just a kid and you just don't know anything. But Heartwork, I thought Heartwork was your first album, to be honest with you, back then. But but yeah, that's crazy. As I said something similar to Jeff, actually, and I'll ask you this. He didn't agree with it at all, and I don't know. I didn't frame it as a question the way I should have, so I'll frame it with you this way, which is that, look, I've done a lot of research on this, and I think I'm right in saying this. Okay, I can go into as much detail, as little detail as you want in terms of like to sort of support the point, but I actually think you guys influenced the entire Swedish sound, and my point around that would be that before Heartwork, it all just sounded like. What Dissection were doing and all that, like that sort of grinding death metal. It wasn't the melodic death metal that came afterwards, but just with the release date of Heartwork, it actually predates the release date of when In Flames did that Gothenburg thing, and then you've got Dark Tranquility, and the big one is, and I know you had his brother in the band for a bit, but At the Gates.
Yeah.
But do you know what I'm saying? Did you feel any of that you guys were responsible for the change in the sound of heavy metal? Because I certainly saw it that way, and I think I'm right, to be honest with you.
Well, I'd love it if you're right on this one. I don't know. I mean, are you more talking about whether we noticed this at the time, back then, that era of the 90s, or later, in recent years?
More back then, because I was just trying to see, because I did a blog entry and I got a lot of support on it, which was that I'll just read it out to you. I remember the considerable shift in the underground after Heartwork, and I adore At the Gates and 90s era In Flames, although I overlooked Dark Tranquility, blah, blah, blah. I just posed the question, those of you that were there back then, what do you think? Did Carcass change the sound of metal? My feelings are that without Carcass, the Gothenburg bands wouldn't evolve the way that they did. And it's not a pissing contest either, because I enjoy all the bands. But the reality is, Heartwork came out before these bands changed their sound. That's it, in a nutshell. So I do wonder if they heard that and went, "Oh, here we go, game on," that sort of thing, because there's definitely a shift in sound afterwards.
Maybe. I mean, I've met some of those guys. I mean, you could say I maybe know a couple. Jeff certainly does. I've not really heard anything of that nature from them. I guess one or two of the guys in Flames seems to be admirers of our work or whatever. All I can say is it might have been a factor, but I think there's other things going on. I mean, when I hear At the Gates, for example, stylistically, I think that's fairly different from us. They plow a different furrow. It's much more kind of direct and focused, I suppose. Our stuff is more sprawling, so it covers more territory. But if you really want the kind of heads down kind of meat and potatoes death metal with a bit of melodic spice, that's what they deliver. So I'm definitely aware of that for a lot of people that band is what it's all about. There are people who think that's where the melodic kind of strain of death metal originated, and they perhaps just don't own any Carcass records. It's not their bag.
Yeah, maybe that's it. I know I've had to rethink it a bit, actually. The reason I do so much thinking about this is I'm also an author, so I write books on this sort of stuff. And all you can do is put theories forward, present my facts to support the theory, and then say I rest my case, more or less. And it's just something that I think fans and aficionados like myself think about. We're wired this way, so this is the way our brain sort of goes to, and because I get an opportunity.
I have that with certain bands and artists I listen to. After a while, you just develop these theories about what took place and what led to something. You're not always right necessarily, but it's just it's just fun to discuss this stuff with your friends, and sometimes it feels like you have nailed it. Like you can see as a fan the lineage of something, the way it's kind of grown, and sometimes you feel like journalists are missing that. But God, I mean, I wouldn't really envy a music journalist these days, because there's so much going on. It would be asking a lot of somebody to listen to an album with their undivided attention from start to finish. I'm sure it doesn't happen that often right now.
No, it's. I've got to be honest with you, it's very tough. The only time I really do it is when I'm preparing for things like this, because I drive in the car quite a bit. Well, I used to. God, I have to walk around with my AirPods now with the dog. Otherwise, I don't get a chance to listen. To be honest with you, and on rare occasions, I've just got to sort of forward through the album a couple of times. I hate doing that because you don't understand it then. But I think the other thing too, and I've got to say it is, it's only really guys like yourself that know how to write albums too. You know why? Because you came from that era where albums were the thing. These days, a lot of the younger bands that are coming out, they're not making albums. They're making one or two songs that they want to catch on Spotify, and the rest is just there to support that. Yeah,
I've heard about this syndrome. I mean, I can't really, I'm not keeping up particularly well. Dan or Jeff are far more aware of what's out there right now than I am. But I've heard about this quite a bit. And with some of the younger music fans that are coming through, I mean, we all know that often the very idea of buying a record is alien to them, but I don't think you can hold that against them if they've never known any difference. But the other thing that's alien is, like, as you said, the concept of an album. They just like tracks, and they'll listen to a track by an artist and they think it's cool. And then if they hear other stuff and it doesn't grab them in the same way or do the same thing that track did, then they'll move on to somebody else. It's just a different way of consuming music, and I mean, I guess no one can dictate to somebody how they should do that. But I'm still very attached to the album as a format over everything, singles and whatever.
Do you listen to much? Do you get a chance to? You kind of answered the question already, but are you still, if you listen to music, is it mainly stuff you already know, or on occasion does something come across your desk and you go, "Oh, that sounds good"?
But it's more kind of, it's branching outwards and, well, quite frankly, backwards, because there'll be an artist that you like from the past, and then when you really explore their catalogue, at some point something sparks you off in another direction. It could be one of the ex-members and his new band or whatever it is, or something on the same label. The producer, whatever it is. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of been the way my music listening has gone for many years, I guess, since probably I was in my early 20s, really. You know, I had been really like a fervent underground guy into tape trading and stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of that music, to me, still has exactly the same power. You know, if I hear it now, it sounds exactly the same. It kind of evokes the same feeling in me. But I haven't had that so much with kind of contemporary and more recent extreme metal. It's just maybe just being the age I'm at. They're great at what they do. There's a huge level of proficiency, you know, as players. It's just there's certain things I'm looking for in the music that I'm not hearing there, you know, which is fair enough because they're coming from a wholly different set of influences, so it's bound to be different. Yeah.
What about Firebird? Is that something you'll ever resurrect or continue to do?
Yeah, I do intend to do that because it's been off over a decade since we sort of ended that thing, and initially it was just a feeling of relief, to be honest, because everything had been quite difficult. You know, anything, just getting some recording dates and then trying to get the material in shape. Everything was a rush and kind of stitched together in a hurry. Lineup problems were probably the biggest thing that killed that band. And then also, you know, I wasn't quite there yet. I mean, you know, in terms of somebody leading a band, writing the stuff, doing some vocals. I hadn't had enough experience to get to that point, and we never really did much in the way of touring. So that's the stuff where you get better at what you do. So in a sense, even though there are several albums, I find them to be quite patchy. Like there's some stuff that I still like, and then there's other stuff that's just unlistenable to me because it's like unfinished demos. You know, the first time you played something or sang it. So yeah, it'd be fun to have a new challenge of that nature, and then maybe just make sure the quality control's a bit higher this time. You know,
yeah,
that's what I'd be aiming for.
It's killer stuff. I mean, it was stuff that I thought that if the right backing had gone behind it, because I love a lot of that Jack Bruce stuff. You know what I mean, like the Cream, the Power Trio sort of stuff. But if you got the right backing, like Queens of the Stone Age sort of thing, you know, like with Placebo, you know, those sort of trios that were sort of springing up at that time, you guys could have been one of them, and you could have had mainstream success because, like, as a listener, as far as I was concerned, that the quality of the songs was certainly there.
Oh, thanks. I mean, yeah, I feel that some of those elements were kind of in place or getting there, and then there was some of it that was just still a little bit off. With regard to the bands you mentioned, I mean, I think, yeah, they're trios, but they were doing the music that people wanted to listen to at that time. I mean, I definitely remember, you know, say around the time we did the first Firebird album, 99. It was exciting for me because it was a new development in my musical life, but very quickly you could sense that it was not the album that many people wanted to hear, you know?
Okay, yeah.
Timing is so crucial with music, you know. Ideally you want all the elements to be in place, and that's asking a hell of a lot. So I think ultimately it's not worth stressing too much about where your thing fits in with contemporary music. You just got to do what feels right to you. Try and keep the integrity there, because you know, then you'll just accept whatever comes your way. At least I was honest with this, because if you go chasing, you know, some kind of acclaim or, you know, doing things that will garner more attention, I guess, yeah, it just leaves the music a little bit bereft of any kind of integrity or substance.
Yeah. Well, I think people can tell too. Someone like myself can always tell if it's being forced.
Exactly that. Yeah, people aren't stupid. They kind of sense that stuff, really, if you're being real or not.
Yeah, I mean, look for you. I mean, you've always had this beautiful melodic tendency. You know, the guitar interludes that you're doing in the middle and toward the end of "In God We Trust." Is that something you've thought about? Say, like, no doubt you got heaps of material like that on the Riff Vault and just recorded and stuff. So would that sort of stuff ever, as a complete album and that style, ever see light of day, do you think?
What you mean, a more kind of guitar-based record?
Yeah, and even the hand claps that you've got throughout that, those little touches, they all just work.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny you should mention the clapping, because that was one of Jeff's ideas when we were doing a lot of percussion. And it was one of those points in the session where, the ideas thing was just wide open. So we'd done a lot of stomping and, more conventional kind of percussion like tambourine or triangle even. And then the clapping thing came up. It was just fun to do. And I didn't really expect it to be quite as prominent in the song, but
it works, though.
I quite like it. Yeah, I think it kind of lifts that part. Yeah, well, I'm glad you do. Yeah. I mean, I've had one or two interviews who've been a bit kind of like, like you've broken an unwritten rule, in the world of metal.
Oh, here we go. Look,
Yeah.
The only answer I've got for them is that you're Bill Steer. You practically invented grinding death. So, shut up. Sorry, you wrote the book,
well,
man. I mean, you can do whatever you want at this point.
Well, yeah, and also I think any artist can, it's sort of like, who am I as a listener to tell some guy I've never met what he should be doing? I mean, I might have all of his albums and have a strong feeling about the kind of thing I want to hear from him, but ultimately he's being him and I'm being me, So, yeah, I mean, luckily, we're all a bit too old to get hung up on that kind of thing. You are going to get flack for certain stylistic changes or developments in your music. It's quite a conservative genre to be part of.
Big time.
That's part of the fun. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the fun, though. Just being aware of these invisible boundaries, but then still kind of pushing against them anyway, just to see if you can get a little bit more space for yourself creatively.
Well, how did Despicable? How was that received?
I honestly don't know, because I read so little of that stuff now. I'm kind of relying on what people are telling me, and I gather it was generally quite positive. It wouldn't have really troubled us otherwise, because as much as we like the stuff on that EP, it is essentially the leftovers from the album recording session. So the original intention was to have this after the album release.
Oh,
and
wow.
obviously
Okay.
the whole world changed with the pandemic, and the label reversed it for completely understandable reasons. So yeah, I mean, that was fine, really.
Mate, I'll make this my last question for you. You've probably got another one coming through or what have you. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no doubt.
I don't know, when you, well, we have had a conversation before. I don't know if you remember these sorts of things, but I mentioned to you that Ralph Santola told me that how great a guitarist you were when you guys were on tour together. And
Oh, wow. That's nice.
yeah, I know. That I remember him saying that you were one of his favourite guitarists, and I think he meant it too. He used to bring Chuck. He used to try and drag Chuck in to watch you guys do sound checks. He was telling me, that was just one of those things that he told me about being on tour with you and stuff. But my final question for you is, and I meant to ask it earlier, but I really wanted to ask you this for a while now. But Necroticism is one of those godly albums for people who love grinding stuff. But I've got to be honest, sometimes I feel like it's a bit of a transitional record. I know I'll get a lot of hate mail for that, but given from Symphonies, then you got Necroticism, and then you go Heartwork, and it's a big jump to Heartwork. So do you feel it's a bit of a transitional record?
Yeah, I do, actually. It's very much in the ear of the beholder, obviously, like all music. But yeah, I would kind of agree with what you said there, because that record for me is us reaching for something that we can't quite get to, maybe. There's some really nice moments on that album, but I'd be lying if I said that we achieved exactly what we wanted. Sonically, we certainly didn't. I mean, I wasn't happy with the guitar tone. And as we went out to do more touring, you could tell that some of the stuff wasn't really great for the stage. You'll be going through a section and you can just feel it. It hasn't quite reached the back of the room. Maybe it's not even reached the front row. I don't know.
Wow.
But
yeah.
by the time we do Heartwork, yeah, that's a band that's done more road work. And as with this current album, Torn Arteries, you're hearing the results of that. It's not something we discussed or planned. It just came out in the music. You know, you have that kind of feeling drilled into you about how the music should be and what would lift a room and lift yourselves as well. So so in that regard, I mean, I'm very fond of Necroticism, but it doesn't mean as much to me as Heartwork if you're looking at that era of the band.
Oh, great to hear. Yeah, I feel that way too. Yeah, the same way too. Yeah, it's great when the artist at the centre, the creator, has similar feelings and thoughts about. I mean, all of your records have just roll gold quality, but I just think without Heartwork, metal doesn't evolve the way it does afterwards. If that makes sense, I've made that point. Like, you know, I actually think you guys are as important to metal as Celtic Frost.
Wow.
Well, think about it. I mean, particularly for you, mate, you got to think about it, is that you're on Scum from Enslavement to Obliteration, especially from Enslavement to Obliteration. I think Scum sort of is that cult thing, but from Enslavement to Obliteration is when the momentum really kicked off. And then you've got those first two albums, and then Necroticism, which I know Necroticism is a lot of people's favourites. I think it's Jeff's favourite, if I remember. Might be Symphonies or Necroticism, but yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. It usually hovers between those two, but I think probably Necroticism. You know, I suppose the fact that Heartwork is the biggest seller is going to turn some people against it. You know, that often happens. You know, you don't want your favorite AC/DC album to be Back in Black. That's that kind of thing.
Yeah, getcha. Yeah.
You know, I get that. You know, if you feel like you've heard a record too many times, sometimes you go to a less obvious one, and then that becomes your favorite. So yeah, fair enough.
Mate, I'll let you go to the next one. Even better and a pleasure the second time around. I hope to have a chat to you again, no doubt, with the roaring creativity you've got, man. It'd be killer. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Andrew.
My pleasure. No worries at all. So all the best with everything, and as I say, hopefully we can catch up again soon.
Yeah, here's hoping. All right.
All right. Thanks, mate. Cheers. Catch
Bye.
you. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, my conversation with the one and only Bill Steer from Carcass, and he used to be in Napalm Death as well. Talked about Firebird in there. Probably doesn't get asked about Firebird too much these days, but Firebird was a killer band, as a matter of fact. Do check out his Firebird releases if you're so inclined. Look, if you like that conversation, there are plenty more just like it over at scarsandguitars.com, almost 600 in fact. And also please like, subscribe, share and all that bullshit. It does help. It truly does. And if you can leave a comment too, that's the way we get around, or the way we work in with social media algorithms, and I tend to go up the food chain, so to speak. So if you liked what you heard, I'd appreciate it if you could leave a comment. Just leaving a pleasant comment, there you go. That'd be appreciated. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith, and I'm the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast series. Until next time, it is goodbye for now.